Like anyone who's ever accomplished anything in their life has had to deal with self-doubt. And like, I think, Ian, let's pivot it to like the conversations you and I have had when you thought about quitting your job and not knowing exactly what that was going to look like. Like, telling people, hey, I've never had a course on writing, but I want to become a writer. Or me wanting to start a real estate business and people think I'm nuts. And I kind of just joke about it. And it isn't fruitful, but you kind of build yourself into a little bit of a wedge. So you have the ability to not get poked when you're vulnerable.
Yeah, I thought about leaving NVR for 2 years before I left. And I didn't get serious about it until I told you. And I told you and I told John McCauley that I'm thinking of leaving NVR. And it was, a bit shocking to both of you to even hear it, even though I had been thinking about it forever. But it wasn't until I told you that it became reality that I could do it. Because then you listened, you guys asked great questions. It wasn't like you were like, go do it, get out of there. You guys were both very balanced about, well, walk me through why you're thinking it. How are you thinking about it? You told me about how you made the decision. Both of you told me that. But by talking about that as a goal, the year and a half before, what I was doing instead was acting like I've just embraced the fact that I'm a career guy and I love being miserable and working all these hours and not having any creativity. I talked about all that. Whenever we would talk about it, I would just tell you how much I loved all of that, which was self-handicapping, because what that did was it would keep you from asking me questions that I didn't feel like dealing with, right? So I did a lot of that. And once I told you I'm thinking about this, now every time I talk to you, once I told you how miserable I was, now I would have to own it. I would have to own that I'm not doing anything about the fact that I'm wallowing around here. Before, when I told you, hey, I love it, it's great, I'm having a great time, they're paying me a lot, having fun, you had nothing to ask me questions about. But once I told you I'm absolutely hating everything about this, then it was like, oh, like now when I talk to you, you'd be like, so what's going on at work?
So here's what I think makes sense. And this is a little different than how we did this in prep, but you've gone far enough into this where I think what you should do is you should talk about what your self-handicapping was. You kind of talked about it with NVR, but you get through it. And then let's get to the other side of it. And then maybe where I'll pick it up is I've built the business, I found the network and the stuff that you wanted to ask me the questions about. But I think for people listening, like most people listening to this podcast either want to be better where they are or they want an opportunity they don't currently have, right? And quitting your job is a big thing for a lot of people. So what I've been able to do is quit my job and turn into a business. What you've been able to do is you've been able to be really smart and specific in how you spend your time. And one of your self-fulfilling prophecies or your self-handicappings was when you quit, you just say you were retired, which was BS. It was just a safety play so people wouldn't ask questions. So why don't you talk a little bit about that, Ian, getting to the point where when people ask you what you're doing, you from wanting to quit to no longer telling people I'm just retired.
Yeah. So, my self-handicapping before I started being honest with some people very close with me, and this includes my wife, my self-handicap when I was tired or irritable at work or people would ask, I'd just be like, we're just trying to get caught up. And, but I would lie about how I felt about work and I would kind of hide behind the money part of it and always do that. And when I stopped self-handicapping is when I just started being honest and telling people that were close to me that I could not stand what I was doing anymore. I found no interest in it. It bored the hell out of me. And the only reason I was working was for a paycheck, which is an embarrassing thing to admit. That's an embarrassing thing. And now, albeit as a senior executive at NVR, that paycheck was substantial. It was massive. So, when you say that to someone, that kind of shuts the conversation down, but it's embarrassing to admit to someone that you are miserable at work when you're talented and that person knows you have options. So for me to admit it to you or to Jenny or to other friends that are successful and say, I just can't stand what I'm doing, it's a bit embarrassing because I'm talking to people that know I have so many options in the world and I'm choosing not I'm choosing to just put up with my situation. So once I started admitting the level of my misery, it forced me to start taking some actions to move.